Going through these in preparation for doing this video, and then doing the video and talking about it, that's tiring enough for me. Think about Craig Murray in court all day. No recording devices allowed. He has to take all of these notes by hand, then go home and write them up. Yeah, I'm really glad he said he was able to get some sleep over the weekend. I mean, he deserves it. And as I said last video, I can only imagine what it's like for Assange. You know, I don't know. People are talking about Assange calling from his little glass cage there at the back. You know, I don't know if I would even be as reserved as Assange is. I'd be saying, hey, let me sit with my defense team. I get to participate in this too, you know. This does have something to do with me. I've got a little bit at stake here, you know. Is this a court of justice or not? But anyway. Yeah, day 13. Friday, September 18th, for those of you who are getting a little confused on the timeline. I know I've been kind of scheduling these out ahead to try and spread out the coverage and maybe get a little bit ahead of it so I can kind of tease you for what's coming, but I don't know what's coming because I'm recording this on Monday morning, so I have no clue what's happening on Monday because it's still happening as I record this. But Friday, more witnesses, more crazy handling of evidence, and things like that. Starting with Nicky Hager, an investigative journalist in New Zealand. He co-authored a book, Hit and Run, about a New Zealand raid in Afghanistan, Operation Burnham. The only thing it apparently achieved was the deaths of civilians, including a child. And so, of course, as Murray says, Hager was the object of much calumny and insult, even of police raids on his home. But in July, an official government report found that all the major facts of the book were correct, and the New Zealand military had run dangerously out of control. Not really a big surprise for regular viewers, right? I mean, because we've been covering Kim.com, the guy who made a website, and so then they raided his home like he was, you know, some big mob boss, you know, Godfather or something like that. Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Hager stated that journalists had a duty to serve the public, and they could not do this without access to secret sources of classified information. This was even more necessary for the public good in time of war. Claims of harm are always made by governments against any such disclosures. It is always stated. Such claims have frequently been made about him throughout his career. No evidence has ever emerged to back up any of these claims that anybody had been harmed as a result of his journalism. And Hager specifically said that the collateral murder video had the most profound effect throughout the world. The publication of that video and the words, "Look at these dead bastages." Yeah, it wasn't the word bastages, but you guys know what that is. You've seen Johnny Dangerously. Yeah. I know, I'm trying to keep the forces of demonetization at bay, but anyway. Had changed world opinion on the subject of civilian casualties. In fact, the rules of engagement have been changed to put more emphasis on avoiding civilian casualties as a direct result. WikiLeaks' idea was a rigorous process of redaction and publication. And I mean, we covered that in the last couple of days, especially the last day about everything they were doing to try and develop the software to do this. And Hager says, they were going through the cables country by country. It was a careful and diligent process. WikiLeaks were very serious and responsible about what they were doing. As far as Assange is concerned, Hager said he found him completely different to the media presentation of him. He was thoughtful, humorous, and energetic. He dedicated himself to trying to make the world a better place, particularly in the post-9/11 climate of a reduction of citizen freedoms in the world. Assange had a vision that the digital age would enable a new kind of whistleblower which could correct the information imbalance between government and citizen. This was against the background of torture, rendition, and war crimes being widely committed by Western governments. And hey, look at that! James Lewis is back for the prosecution. Okay. Maybe he's on his meds now, we'll see. So Lewis asks about the charges. Hager says, I see a mismatch. Some charges of publication, some of possession, then other stuff added. Lewis, Assange is not charged with publishing the collateral murder video your evidence says so much about. Hager, You can't look at the effect the WikiLeaks revelations had on the world in that kind of neat and compartmentalized way. The cables, logs, and all the rest affected the world as a whole. And then he goes on to some things like, have you ever paid a government official? Things like that. At one point he asks, have you ever hacked? And Hager just says, that depends on how you define hack, which, as we've seen, Lewis doesn't want to do. I mean, how do you define hack? That's, all sorts of... There's all sorts of different things that can mean. So Lewis says, you have, as a journalist, merely been the passive recipient of official information. Presumably you have never done anything criminal to obtain government information. Hager, you said passive. That is not the way we work. Journalists not only actively work our sources, we go out and find our sources. The information might come in documents. It might come in a memory stick. In most cases, our sources are breaking the law. Our duty is to help protect them from being caught. We actively help them cover their backs sometimes. Lewis, would you knowingly put a source in danger? Hager, no, of course not. However, Lewis, no, stop, you answered. No, he didn't. You get to complete your answer. Edward Fitzgerald QC rose to object but found no support from Judge Dalek. Nope. He doesn't get to complete his answer. We're just letting him, stop it off at the first 3 words. Yeah, that's plenty. I'm sure that's all of it. I'm sure there was no nuance there or anything. So, Lewis. The Guardian published an editorial article abhorring WikiLeaks' publishing of unredacted cables and stating that hundreds of lives have been put in danger. Do you agree with those statements? Hager. My information is that WikiLeaks did not release the cables until others had published. Lewis. We say your understanding is wrong. Well, bully for you. Alright, so Lewis asks about the David Lee and Luke Harding story. We covered that a couple of days ago. States that Assange wished to release the whole lot sooner. It also states that at a dinner at El Moro restaurant, Assange stated that if informants were killed, they had it coming to them. Would you care to comment? Funny he didn't ask that about the witness who was there. Remember, he had someone on the witness stand who was actually there. Not only did he not ask him that, but the judge prohibited the defense from asking him that. But the guy who was there says that didn't happen. Assange never said that. So here he is, once again, asking it to someone who wasn't there at the time. Hager. I know that there was great animosity between David Lee and Julian Assange by the point the book was written. I would not regard them as a reliable source. I do not want to dignify that book by answering it. Lewis, are you trying to assist the court or assist Assange? Okay, not on his meds then. Good to know. Really, are these like the best prosecutors they could have gotten for this? I mean, come on. At least get people with the maturity that, a basic 12-year-old has. Alright, so skipping down several questions. Lewis asks about redactions, and Hager says there were quite a few names marked strictly protect. This was not in the context for reasons of safety in the countries which I was working on. It was purely to avoid political embarrassment. So that's what the strictly protect means. And it's not an actual classification either. The United States has 3 classifications: confidential, secret, and top secret. And if it was the case where the names of these people getting out would have been dangerous to them, it would have been classified as secret and top secret. And if it was really that much of a problem, they would have been called top secret. Again, none of these were top secret. So, Lewis, how long did you work in London on the cables? Hager, it was several days to do several hundred cables. Lewis, did you show your statement to the defense in draft? Hager, yes, I have always done this when I have submitted an affidavit. And Murray chimes in, this is normal. Affidavits or statements from defense witnesses are normally drawn up and, if affidavits, taken under oath by the defense solicitors. Anyway, redirect from Fitzgerald. You were asked if you know what Assange is charged with. Do you know he is charged with obtaining and receiving all of the diplomatic cables, the Iraq war logs, the Afghan war logs, the rules of engagement, and the Guantanamo detainee assessments? Hager, yes. Fitzgerald, and he could not have published any of them without first obtaining and receiving them, so the distinction as to which he is charged for publishing makes no difference to the liability of journalists like yourself to the Espionage Act for obtaining and receiving U.S. classified information. Hager, yes. And Fitzgerald asks about the September 2011 publication of cables. Hager: I believe the WikiLeaks people and witnessed their extreme seriousness in the redaction process to which they invited me in. I do not believe they suddenly changed their mind about it. This publication came about through a series of bad luck and unfortunate events, not by WikiLeaks. But that 9-month redaction process was not wasted. WikiLeaks had, at an early stage, warned the U.S. authorities and invited them to be part of the redaction process. Assange had stressed to U.S. authorities the danger to those named in the report. While the U.S. authorities had not got involved in redaction, they had started a massive exercise in warning those named in the reports that they might have been in danger, and helping those the most at risk to take measures to relocate. I think this is overlooked. Julian Assange bought those people 9 months. I also believe that is the major part of the explanation why, in the end, there were no identifiable deaths and was no wholesale damage. Fitzgerald: What do you believe the bad luck to have been? Hager: I understand it was the publication of a password in the Lee Harding book, but I have no direct knowledge. Fitzgerald: On this book, you have said there was bad blood between Luke Harding, David Lee, and Julian Assange. Hager: Yes, I would not put much weight on that book as a source myself. And Murray chimes in again: I hope you will forgive me for adding personal knowledge here, but the bad blood was nothing to do with redaction and everything to do with money. Julian Assange was briefly the most famous man in the world for a while and had not yet been tarnished with the allegations arranged in Sweden. Rights to an Assange book on WikiLeaks and a biography were potentially worth millions to the authors. Collaboration had been discussed with Lee, but Julian had decided against. The Guardian were furious. That is what really happened. It seems a good explanation of why they instead published a money-spinning book attacking Assange. It does not really explain why they published the password to the unredacted cable cache in that book. So there are a few other questions, some about the rules of engagement, but we'll talk about those in a little bit. And Fitzgerald says, one charge related to receiving and obtaining the ROEs, is that why you mention them? Hager: Yes. The soldiers always retain the base rights of self-defense. There is no basis for claiming their publication poses a dire risk for the troops. It arguably leads to less conflict if people know when force will and will not be used. All right, moving on to Jennifer Robinson. This is the first read evidence, which means if the prosecution doesn't wish to cross-examine them, they'll just have their evidence read into the record without having to appear. After substantial discussions and disagreements between the lawyers, this has been resolved to be a short summary or gist of their evidence. My reports, this is Murray, then for this group of witnesses are the gist of a gist. So I guess this video or audio file, or however you're receiving it, is a gist of a gist of a gist. So keep that in mind. Oh man, it would be so nice to be able to read the actual reports of these witnesses in this so-called public trial. This has to do with that whole Dana Rohrabacher situation. Rohrabacher had stated he was acting on behalf of President Trump and would report back to Trump on his return to Washington. Rohrabacher said that the Russiagate story was politically damaging to President Trump, was damaging to U.S. interests and to U.S.-Russian relations. It would therefore be very helpful if Julian would reveal the real source of the DNC leaks. This would be in the public interest. Julian Assange had put the case for a full pardon of Chelsea Manning and for any indictment against himself as a publisher to be dropped on First Amendment grounds. Rohrabacher had said there was an obvious win-win situation here, and he would investigate what might be possible to get him out. Assange could reveal the DNC source in return for a pardon, deal, or agreement. Assange had, however, not named any source to him. Now, wouldn't you know it? The press, which has been ignoring this from day one, jumps on this part. This is the only reports I've seen, and all the searching I've done, and all the looking through the mainstream media to see what they're talking about this. This is what they jumped on. Rohrabacher jumping on them, offering a pardon on behalf of Trump, about Russiagate, because I don't know why. Because they're still trying to maintain the lie, which we now know to be a lie, that Trump was in cahoots with Russia over the whole Russiagate story. But if that was the case, why would Rohrabacher be doing this so they could release the source? I mean, they would only be doing that if the source would exonerate Trump, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, that is the one and only part of this that the press seems at all interested in reporting on. So, all right, so we go to Khaled El-Masri. The United States government objected bitterly to Mr. El-Masri being heard. Gee, imagine that. A compromise had been reached that he could give evidence provided he did not allege he was tortured by the U.S. government, something we all know to be true anyway. But strangely, Mr. El-Masri was unable to connect by video link, even though the defense team had been able to speak to him by video a few hours earlier. Technical staff in the court having been unable to resolve the technical issue. That's actually how Murray puts it. Yeah, no. The timing of these technical issues, no. It's too easy to maintain video links now. It's just, oh my God. A schmendrick like me does it at least once a month. No, it's not difficult. But anyway. Judge Bereitzer suddenly decided to raise again the issue of whether El-Masri's evidence should be heard at all. So James Lewis stated they did not merely oppose his evidence of being tortured, they opposed the making of any claim that a WikiLeaks released cable showed that they had put pressure on the government of Germany not to arrest those allegedly concerned in his alleged extradition, even though the cable absolutely says that. The U.S. government had not pressurized the government of Germany, Lewis said. Mark Summers, QC for the defense, said that the Supreme Chamber of the European Court in Strasbourg had already judged his claims to be true and that the WikiLeaks cable plainly and inarguably showed the U.S. government exerting pressure on Germany. And Murray publishes an image of the cable if you want to see it for yourself. Judge Bereitzer said she was not going to determine if the U.S. had pressurized Germany or if El-Masri had been tortured. Those were not the questions before her. Mark Summers said it went to the question of whether WikiLeaks had performed a necessary act to prevent criminality by the U.S. government and enable justice. Lewis responded that it was unacceptable to the U.S. government that allegations of torture should be made. Yeah, I'm sure it is. Well, at this point, Julian Assange understandably became very agitated. He stood up and declared very loudly, "I will not permit the testimony of a torture victim to be censored by this court." A great commotion broke out. Bereitzer threatened to have Julian removed and have the hearing held in his absence. There was a break following, which it was announced that El-Masri would not appear, but that the gist of the evidence would be read out, excluding detail of U.S. torture or of U.S. pressure on the government of Germany. So, Summers read it out. I won't summarize it, you can read it for yourself. But the relevant part is that Munich state prosecutors released arrest warrants for his CIA kidnappers, but these were never executed. When WikiLeaks issued the cables, the pressure that had been brought on the German government not to prosecute became plain. The judge did not prevent Summers from saying this. We therefore know that the U.S. blocked judicial investigation of a crime. The European Court of Human Rights had explicitly relied on the WikiLeaks cables for part of its judgment in the case. The Grand Chamber confirmed that he had been beaten, hooded, shackled, and sodomized. There had been no accountability in the USA. The CIA Inspector General had declined to take action over the case. The ECHR judgment and supporting documentation had been sent to the office of the U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, precisely the same office that was now attempting to extradite Assange, and that office had declined to prosecute the CIA officers concerned. In March 2020, the ICC had announced that it was opening an investigation. In response, Pompeo had declared any non-U.S. citizen who cooperated with that ICC investigation, including officers of the ICC, would be subject to financial and other sanctions. Finally, El-Masri testified that WikiLeaks publication had been essential to him in gaining acceptance of the truth of the crime and of the cover-up. In fact, the impact of Mark Summers' reading of El-Masri's statement on the court was enormous. Summers, Murray says, has a real gift for conveying moral force and constrained righteous anger in his tone. I thought the testimony had a definite impression on Judge Bereitzer. She showed signs not of discomfort or embarrassment, but of real emotional distress while she was listening intently. Subsequently, 2 different witnesses, each situated in separate sections of the court from me, both in separate and unprompted conversations with me, told me they thought that El-Masri's testimony had really gotten through to the judge. Vanessa Bereitzer is, after all, only human, and this is the first time she's been forced to deal with what this case is actually about. Yeah, and that's what happens. I mean, you spend your whole life believing the government, believing what your teachers told you, believing what the news media tells you. And so you overlook these things and you hear about things like the Assange leaks and Snowden and things like that, and the cognitive dissonance sets in. But at some point, you're going to get slapped in the face with the truth about what government really is. And then you're going to have to say, what the hell have I been supporting my whole life? I don't know if this is going to lead to a catharsis for Bereitzer, but we can only hope. There's more to cover during the day, but I've already been talking for 25 minutes. We've still got a couple more witnesses to go through, so I'll do them in another video. Until then, thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to share these everywhere. Share the videos and the audio files everywhere you can. Share Murray's blog post everywhere you can. Make sure people understand what's going on. This is important. I'm dedicating so much time to this. Instead of doing other videos, which might give me more views and be more popular, to try and get all of this out. This is really that important. And also please comment, because that feeds the algorithm and helps this get up in the YouTube listings beyond all the shadow banning and everything. And also, if you like what I'm doing, please consider going to donate.bogosity.tv and giving me a little something. Even just a few pennies in crypto will help more than you know. Thank you very much for listening. Again, we'll continue with this day's testimony in a separate video. Until then, stay strong and be free.